Welcome to AI for Good, the leading, action-oriented, global and inclusive United Nations platform on AI. Organized by the International Telecommunication Union, the United Nations Agency for Digital Technologies, in partnership with 40+ UN sister organizations and co-convened with Switzerland. The goal of AI for Good is to identify innovative applications, build skills and standards, and advance partnerships to solve global challenges. In today's AI for Good event, we are counting on you to use the live video wall feature to ask questions and post comments to help create an engaging discussion. We encourage you to stay until the end to chat, connect, ask questions, and network with our distinguished facilitators and world-class AI experts in the neural network. It is now time to kick off the session and welcome our first speaker. The floor is
Hello and a warm welcome to this special webinar on deepfakes and misinformation. I'm Mike Mullane. Now, we've all heard stories like the one about the British engineering group that lost an eye-watering $25 million in a deepfake scam. And just to remind you of the details, cyber criminals persuaded an unlucky finance manager to transfer the funds by cloning the company's chief financial officer and setting up a video call. Or how about the Italian businessman who thought he was speaking to the country's defense minister and was conned into lending the government a 7-figure sum to free a hostage off the books? Another lucrative robbery. But it's not just about the money. Deepfakes are destroying reputations, influencing elections, and undermining trust in media and other institutions. According to the World Economic Forum, deepfakes and misinformation are the biggest short-term risk facing the world. And that's also because they can feed into and condition our responses to all the other threats, from armed conflict to climate change. So what can we do about it, and what's already being done? Joining me today is a distinguished panel of experts to help answer those questions. They include Shirin Anlin, who's a media technologist at Witness, an NGO that helps people use video to protect and defend human rights. Laura Ellis, who's head of technology forecasting at the BBC. Charlie Beckett, a journalism professor at the London School of Economics, where he also leads the Polis think tank. Touraj Ebrahimi, a professor at Switzerland's EPFL, and Professor Ebrahimi also chairs JPEG, the group that created and develops the JPEG picture format, among other things. And last but not least, Maurice Turner, who's technical policy lead at TikTok. But first, introducing today's webinar is Alessandra Sala. Dr. Sala is the Director of AI and Data Science at Shutterstock. She's also lending her leadership to an IEC, ISO, and ITU initiative that sees the answer to deepfakes and fake media in robust international standards underpinning regulation. Alessandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mike. What an honor to be here today, and thanks for the kind introduction. I'd like to share very few key insight about AI Multimedia Authenticity Initiative, as you have just introduced it. Let's take a step back and remind ourselves where we are today. In a world where AI, and specifically generative AI, it gives us the tool and the possibility of imagine the world of creativity and represent anything that we have in mind at a level of realism that sometimes is difficult to spot what's real and what's AI generated. Those are two beautiful images, and if I ask which one is AI generated, you may try to guess, maybe the right, maybe the left. It's both of them. And those are already 2 years old picture. Today, the AI generated images are even better and therefore defeat our human ability to spot and detect what's a real image or media content in general, and what's AI generated. What happened in a world where AI can be used to defeat our human defenses of truth and fake? What Mike was mentioning, the deepfake, and the World Economic Forum is putting misinformation and disinformation as the most important risk in the next few years. We have already seen those kind of online scam, deep fake, traveling the world. This video went viral in China and everyone believed it was the real Taylor Swift. It's even worse when it attacked women or in general human to destroy their reputation and their identity with false information. And we get even worse when we touch kids. Some of the deepfake scam that Mike has just mentioned, I won't go into detail, but there are actual fraud that cost a lot of money to organization, to companies around the world. And in general, this technology is unfortunately also used to manipulate our emotion and create polarized society. So fortunately, the UN system and many companies around the world are coming together and screaming for solution. Standardization activities have been identified as one of the most important to help us to move forward, and the World Standard Cooperation already last year identified that this was an area where we should have acted. And at the end of the AI for Good Summit last year, this collaboration on AI multimedia authenticity was launched to bring together world standard organization, companies, academic excellences to all combine our effort, our capabilities, and our competence to re-establish trust in the multimedia ecosystem. So today I'm joined by some of the speakers that you have already met, Mike today and Turaj later, in bringing forward this vision of collecting the standard, collecting the tool and the technology that we have at our disposal to fight misinformation and deepfake, but also to invest where we have still gaps today. We have three pillars. The technical pillar, technology, it's not enough. We need policy and we need organization to understand the importance of adopting this technology. So our three pillars that are helping to walk this journey. And some of our important events. We are working with international organization and event, with the standard organization, with conferences on cybersecurity and online security, with regulators around the world, and showcasing where we already have solution and where we still need to invest together. And today the discussion will help us to understand the possibility and the opportunity that we have in this moment. So I want to thank you, our partner. We're open for more company and organization to join our journey and support us. Our next stop is the AI for Good this year in 2025 in Geneva on the 11th of July. We'll wait you there. Join our global commitment because this is an issue that touched every individual around the world. And with that, I wish you a very interesting conversation moving forward.
Thank you, Alessandra. And I'd like to go first to Charlie Beckett at the LSE. Charlie, how big a threat is fake media to public service journalism?
Well, I think it's a threat to any kind of journalism in the sense that if we end up in a world where people are suspicious of anything that they see online, then the good information could lose out as much as the bad information. I mean, I think that's the more general problem that we've got going forwards. But I do want to say that I think there's a real danger that we misunderstand what misinformation is or what deepfakes are. You know, we assume this is all about the technology. But in fact, the World Economic Forum was completely wrong. They said that misinformation was the biggest threat to democracy facing the world. Well, last year we had the year of democracy, didn't we? With all those elections, more elections than ever before. And the hard evidence is that there was very little impact of deepfakes. There were one or two cases, but generally speaking, very little. And generally speaking, very little evidence that misinformation somehow influenced many of those campaigns or indeed the results. So I think there's a real danger that we get distracted. Where you do have misinformation, it usually comes from human beings. It comes from politicians who now deliberately weaponize that confusion. They deliberately lie and mislead, and they deliberately try and undermine good sources. So it's no surprise, for example, that in authoritarian regimes like the United States, you're getting attacked both on the press but also on universities, and people are familiar about that happens around the world. That does not mean that you don't try and create good information, you don't do fact checking. I mean, I run a program that works with hundreds of newsrooms around the world. We are deliberately helping them to use AI to try and promote good information, to try and help citizens around the world find trustworthy, accessible, relevant information. But I do think that by constantly blaming misinformation or let alone deepfakes, we are actually letting off the hook the real causes of it. Those criminal cases, for example, they are done by real people. So I really welcome any fact checking. I welcome any attempts actually to try and regulate this new AI driven information sphere. Well, that's going to be incredibly complicated. But the one thing I think we have to be careful of is that we don't panic about the technology because, as Alessandra mentioned at the beginning of her introduction, there are so many positive things you can do. There are so many ways that you can help, in some ways, to bridge inequalities, to improve information for people around the world, to try and supercharge good journalism, for example. So my warning is, you know, let's talk about deepfakes, let's talk about misinformation, but let's not get it out of context because there's a real danger that you're actually promoting cynicism, you're promoting disengagement by the public from all information because they've been told, usually by the bad guys, that you certainly can't trust nice liberal elites like us.
Charlie, when they do these sort of public opinion surveys every year and they ask people whether they trust institutions or not, overwhelmingly the message in recent years is that people no longer believe what they read or what they see. And that's undermining journalism, whether we like it or not. What do we do to restore that trust? Is it just fact checking or there are other things we can do too?
No, I mean, I agree with the Nobel Prize winner Maria Ressa that those trust surveys are not just useless, they're actually harmful. If you ask me, do I trust politicians? Do I trust the media? I'm going to say no, not all of them, not automatically. But there are certain journalists or certain politicians who I have more confidence in, who are more transparent and more honest with me. So first of all, let's stop those surveys. They are really harmful because the bad people can use them. They can say, look, no one really trusts scientists. Nobody really trusts politicians. So you let me have my way. How can journalists and anybody else? They just have to keep doing what they do better. And I think they have to be more transparent. And I think we have to be much more humble, actually. As journalists, for example, we have to realize for the last 20, 30 years, we have become more irrelevant. We've become more elitist. We've become more obsessed by our own agendas, rather than thinking, what do people need information for? What is relevant to their lives? And then thinking about how can we reconstruct things like journalism so that people do get that information optimized for their lives. And we don't expect them to come to us. We've got to work so much harder at going to where they are and giving them the kind of information that's useful to them. But you've got to accept that the old days when there would be a lovely journalistic elite or an academic elite that could sort of sit there and be gatekeepers of information has gone. The citizen, the user, if you like, they are now got so empowered, and it's really up to us to try and get their attention.
You just reminded me of something that Kate Adie once said to me. She said, brain surgeons are elite. Nobody distrusts them. Um, so interesting. I'll come back to you, Charlie, if that's okay. And I'd like to go next to Shireen Anlan at Witness. And Witness has a very special challenge in that you're actually running an NGO that's teaching people how to use video to promote human rights. How worried are you about technology or bad people undermining trust in the video that we see online, for example?
That's a huge worry for us, although I do agree with Professor Beckett about uh, we should not panic. And one of our initiatives is Prepare Don't Panic, right? So through that initiative, we are actively trying to understand where it meets our communities. We are a grassroots organization global, and really trying to work around the worries that come from the ground. A lot of that is around access. A lot of that is around privacy and transparency. And through that, we are trying to impact standard development. We are part of the C2PA, the Coalition of Authenticity initiative, and also working a lot around detection. I do have some slide to share, Mike. Is that the time to do that?
That would be great, as long as it's not more than a few minutes. That would be fine.
I'll try to keep it short. So we did started by what Witness is, and the work that we are doing, which is really going back to we should really understand how landscape is changing, how the media landscape is changing, and how trust is being evolved. AI or deepfake or generative AI are not a new threat, right? We've been, like you already mentioned, it says the trust around media has already been undermined for a long time with shallow fake, with miscontextualization. So AI is amplifying a lot of that. But a lot of what we are hearing from our community is really the lack of access. And we started to develop this project that called the Deepfake Rapid Response Force to connect our communities with frontline journalists and fact checkers to really analyze deceptive or potential deceptive AI in real time, to support media literacy because there is a gap in media literacy, and to support responsible reporting around that. So the hype and the danger around it, deceptive AI will not go without evidence and detailed informed reporting. And we worked a lot around the 2024 election. And I do agree that it was not the hype that everyone thought it going to be. But I do think there is a huge miss of how we analyzed the danger of AI. If we're looking at the global majority, for example, there were a lot of cases that the detection or the authenticity solution are just not applicable in those contexts. So I just wanted to share a few cases that we dealt with that detection actually failed. For example, when we are dealing with real world scenario of audio that have background noise, obviously audio leaked conversation that are being shared online, mostly will have background noise or cross talking, or low quality, high compression, right? That's how content is being shared online. And detection is really failing around that types of challenges, as well as different languages that are not being supported by a lot of the detection tools that exist. So here is an example from Sudan that we just could not support because the teams that were available would not support Arabic language. There is also bias to the file of content that detection can analyze. For example, radio conversations that we are dealing from a conflict situation or war. For example, this is from the civil war in Sudan, where walkie-talkie is just not a type of media that was trained, the detection tools were trained on, or skin color, tone color, that is with the combination of compression can really lead to confusion or undermine the confidence in result of detection. and so on. Like there is a lack of accessibility for tools, the issues of access when journalists using manipulated image, but also original image from Mexico, where both came back as potentially fake, right? So how journalists are dealing with this like conflicted result that comes from online detection, or when detection is just not enough, you have to go back to your fact-checking skills. But in this landscape of AI, a lot of the communities are just feeling intimidated by going back to their skills and really remember where they're coming from and how skillful they are in analyzing content. And like Professor Beckett said, politicians are just using AI as an excuse, and we see that a lot. Third of our cases were real, genuine evidence that basically were undermined as a fakery. And the challenge of detecting real evidence is uh, much bigger because of you really need to have in order to detect manipulation, you need just to have the artifacts of the AI inside of it. But when you detect real content, you really need to go into evidentiary type of way. So in this case, for example, it was very easy to detect that or to comment that it's a real case because it's a large crowd and the experts know the current capabilities of AI, but communities, the global communities, do not necessarily have that type of knowledge and insight because of the hype around AI. So how we are dealing with it in Witness, going back to your questions, we are part of, like I said, the C2PA, really trying to uh, uh, think about the standard development that's happening in ISO and ITU, and really thinking about what does it mean to incorporate human rights framework into that? How are we protecting privacy, anonymity, making sure transparency in a global sense, accessibility, and so on. But we're also thinking about all those lessons we are learning from detection, and just about to release the TRIDE benchmark, which is a truly innovative and effective detection benchmark to support also that type of solution until we have understanding what mitigation we can offer our community mitigation solutions, right? Because authenticity is so important, but might not be accessible in the global sense for a while or around open source. So detection is a really critical aspect in the solution that we can offer. And we have to make sure it's being developed with the right framework in mind and really understanding the global challenges that exist around it. And we're advocating for also how different bodies should respond and what recommendation actionable step they can take, and also for standard bodies. So having standard requirements for detection tools, establish guidelines, and develop benchmark for regular update, durability, transparency, explainability, and so on. I will put a link for this in the chat. It's something that also came from this work of for journalists and for our community, what they can do. But that's like just a really broad remarks for this.
Thank you very much, Shireen. And actually, I was going to promote that tip sheet that you showed very quickly at the end. And as Shireen says, she'll share the link with you. But do visit witness.org to download that tip sheet. It's written in plain, direct language, easy to understand, easy to implement. Thank you very much, Shireen. I'd like to go next to Maurice Turner, technical policy lead at TikTok. Now, Maurice, of course, social media are often painted in the media as the bad guys in this. What are you actively doing at TikTok to combat disinformation, misinformation, if anything?
We're doing quite a bit. Our commitment has always been to make TikTok a place where people feel safe and they want an authentic experience. So, whatever we can do to make sure that they have that interaction with the creators that they enjoy and they find that original content that they're looking for, that's what we're doing. Specifically around misinformation, as I said, we're focused in on that output. What does it look like when people come across content that is deceptive or misleading? So that guides a lot of our policy thinking and a lot of our product decisions. When we were looking at how is AI going to impact that particular aspect of content on platform? We started quite a while ago. It was actually back in 2020 that we had a dedicated section in our community guidelines around edited media. And we evolved that particular policy 2 years ago to also include AI generated content. It's not necessarily about, any sort of content that's created with AI. It's that focus on what are those realistic images? What's that realistic audio and video that's likely to mislead the person who's consuming it? So that's where we put our focus. That led us naturally to C2PA and trying to make sure that we have a high level of confidence in the labels that we're putting on that content. That for us is part of a larger commitment to media literacy. It's not that labels should always be seen as warnings, because if the ecosystem is oversaturated with labels, then people start to get a blindness to those labels and ignore them. The way that I see it is that those labels are more of an opportunity for learning, for people who are curious to understand how that content's being made or where it's coming from. They can get that signal and they can take a deeper look to see, what are the tools? Where's the source? How should I be interpreting this information, this content that I'm seeing? So from that standpoint, it really does, work perfectly with our concept of people want an authentic experience. They want to be able to express themselves in an authentic way, and they want to have those authentic engagements with the creators who are making the content.
Thank you, Maurice, and I'd like to come back to you later. If I could go next to Professor Ibrahimi, Touraj. As Maurice just mentioned, not all AI generated content or manipulated media is necessarily bad. Some of it is actually quite useful, or we appreciate, for example, special effects in movies. We edit audio before broadcasting to take out ums and ahs and pauses and so forth. So not all bad. What I'd like to ask you, first of all, though, Touraj, is a few people have already mentioned the S word, standards. How do you explain standards to people who don't know about them?
Yeah, maybe the best way for me to answer to you is that I also have prepared a couple of slides, and maybe it's the easiest if I can show them and this at the same time answer to this question.
Thank you, Touraj.
Okay. First of all, most standards are based on technology. And although I think nobody will disagree that technology is not the only solution to the problem of misinformation, deepfakes, etc., it's part of the solution. It was caused by technology. Deepfakes, generative AI is a technological issue, and it happened because of technology evolution. And the answer should also come from, at least in part, from technology. Now, when you look at technologies, there are a number of approaches. Some of them are reactive. By reactive, one means, for example, how to detect generative AI, deepfakes, etc. That was mentioned. There are a few products around that do that, and they are growing in number. There is also the proactive approach. The proactive approach, before distributing any content, you allow its traceability through provenance tools, so that they can be traced back. And last but not least, the correlative approach, which is a modern type of fact checking. When you receive information, if you know some sources that you trust, maybe you can check with those sources and see if you want to trust it or not. Now, each of these approaches, these three approaches, there are a very large number of solutions that already exist, and even more are into making, and they exist. So we basically have the danger, and if not already, that soon we're going to be confronted by a very large number of solutions that will coexist. And in order to manage this chaos, we need some understanding, some convention that people refer to as standard, to answer to your question. These standards, of course, bring interoperability, but a large number of other solutions that are interesting, because you usually trust more a technical solution that is coming from a standardization body that you trust than just a random one. That is the issue of efficiency, cost reduction, economy of scale, all these things. But we cannot today either in a visible or invisible way, for example, take a picture and say, oh, we put this label, while others are going to put other labels. You end up having a picture that will have more labels on it, visible or invisible, than the picture itself. And now, standard is a good word. Interoperability and all these things I mentioned are good, but implementation is also very important. Let's not forget that this challenge is a global challenge. It's not regional. It's not in the boundaries of a single country or continent. It's everywhere. And therefore, it's a global phenomenon, and we need global standards and also global regulations for that. Now, in order to make it, anybody can claim they can do it. The key to success is that all stakeholders are put around the table, and that this is done in an inclusive, open, transparent, and equitable way. And of course, different parts of the world, different cultures, different business models, they might have different views. It's very important that where things are set into standards, flexibility is provided so that they can be adopted and tailored to national, regional, or international sensitivities. And also, and this is very important, standards should be governed by international community. It is really not a very good practice to give the keys to the control of a standard to a small number of companies or a small number of countries. It will just hinder even the existence of these standards, and they won't be able to spread everywhere. Now we have good news, because IEC, ISO, and ITU, and well, this event is somehow also organized by them. They really have a good track record in standardization in the ways that I just mentioned. And this has already been demonstrated in deployment of standards for telephony, broadcasting, telecommunications, and hopefully also here we can achieve the same for this problem that we have at our hands.
Thank you, Touraj. I just see if I can switch my video back on. There we are. I'm back. I'm back live again. Thank you very much, Touraj. Just one very, very quick follow-up question. When we talk about standards, the IEC, ISO, and ITU variety, what makes them different? What sets them apart from some of the other standards that we see? I mean, it seems to me that all sorts of documents are called standards nowadays. What do we mean by a standard?
Yeah, you're right. And since standards, and many countries, many legislators are looking for standards in order to rely on legislations and regulations on them, we are seeing a lot of standards appearing. Sometimes it's genuine interest because there are solutions and people want to get together and quickly agree on something and push it out. Really, as I said, a good and ideally good and efficient standard would be a standard where the governance of what it is through a process that is well defined. So it's not in the hands of one company or one country. And as I mentioned in my slides, ISO, IEC, and ITU, they actually have these processes already present, and it has really even proven more than once to be efficient. Which technologies and where to start with is already by itself an issue. It should be open, inclusive, transparent. But then you always need, especially when you have technology that evolves, you need amendments, you need extensions of standards. Even those have to be really decided and maintained by international standardization bodies, because they have a process in place. Otherwise, if it's a de facto proprietary solution of one or two companies and they just decide to update it, well, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I have loads of Word documents that they cannot open anymore because whoever made and controls that format until recently just was updating them, right? And it wasn't necessarily always backward compatible. So these are the type of things we have to keep in mind, that what we are defining is not only for immediate now and immediate future, it's really for long-term future. And there will be 5 years, 10 years from now that people will access some of these materials, and they want to also verify and decide whether they want to trust it or not, and check their authenticity.
Siraj, thank you very much. And I'd like to go next to Laura Ellis at the BBC. Laura, how worried are you about deepfakes?
So pretty worried. I think one of the things that we used to get told quite a lot was that deepfakes are the dog that hasn't barked yet. I don't know if anyone else remembers this conversation. I worked in news for 30 years before coming to R&D about 5 years ago and doing a lot of work on deepfakes and AI and generally things of that ilk. And I think we've seen quite clearly, and Shireen's organisation has done some great work, and I follow it very carefully because it's always right at the cutting edge of showing, where these problems are arising. And we are starting to see really harmful stuff that has the risk of, or actually does, affect people's thinking, affect their view perhaps of an election, and various other things. And we also know that intent is a massively important part of this. We can see where that's coming from, and we know that some of it's done with a very harmful or a very specific intent. So that's a worry too. So pretty worried, but also I'm an optimist, and there's some good things being done to help in this area too.
Thanks. I understand you have some slides as well that you'd like to share.
I do, and somebody's very kindly going to run these for me because the BBC has taken against running slides on Zoom at this point. At least it has for my laptop, so thank you very much. I don't know if anybody can see. There we go, a very schlocky image. So as you probably recognize, this is a generated image, and it was just I actually love the fact that I didn't specifically say it should be a beautiful young woman, but it was supposed to be somebody fighting misinformation. And I made this a few months ago with ChatGPT, and it just kind of summed up for us really, where we are. There is a growing tide, if you like, of pollution of our media ecosystem, and those of us who put content into that ecosystem are really worried about it because we've touched on this already. But when your good content is out there, but it's surrounded by so much stuff which might be good, it might just be clickbait, it might be harmful. Distinguishing it is really, really hard. So if we could go to the next slide, please. I think there's a particularly interesting image, which a lot of you, I'm sure, will recognize on the right. So this is an image that came out of one of the storms in the US, and it's an entirely AI generated image. But when this was pointed out to the person who'd shared it, they said it doesn't really matter because it's just the vibe. That's the vibe. That's what we want to say about this story. And that really sort of hit me as a journalist, because I thought, gosh, have we moved so far as a society that really it's about finding an image which isn't real, that just kind of shows you the vibe, rather than actually reporting directly from something, like a storm or a flood, even if that might be difficult to get to. And I've wrestled with this. There have been lots of other kind of interesting developments, like the AI channel that has been launched, where one of the assertions was, if we can't get to a news story, we'll show you what we think it looked like. To me, that isn't news, and I think it's kind of worrying. And as news journalists, I think it does genuinely put our content at risk, because what we're about is getting things out there which may be unpalatable, and I know that's a real issue at the moment, maybe difficult to get to, but it's what we do. And I think being competed with by somebody's version of event is really tricky. There is this estimate that 15 billion images online are going to be AI generated at this point. I mean, who knows whether that's true, but it's a lot. And some estimates, although this is contended, suggest that 90% of online content will be synthetic in some way, shape, or form, whether that's filtered or altered or entirely generated by 2026, which is obviously quite soon. And we just know that the ecosystem is gradually being not only polluted but also disintermediated, so we're having less ability to see where our content is, whether it's being imposted. We've got a new verb there, and we really need to help our audiences maintain clear pathways to trustworthy news and content. And to be really clear, that's the content they choose to trust. Not, we're not saying trust these organizations. We're saying if you trust this organization, we want you to be able to find your way reliably to that content. We could do the next slide. This feels a bit self-serving, but it is important to us. Our brand is at risk as well. So as we shift our content, as I say, to the internet, this imposter content's an issue, but also our brand properties, our talent, our name, all being used without our consent. And we've suffered from it. There's an image here on the right, which was created by somebody. We don't know who. We might have our suspicions, but wasn't a BBC story and yet bought our branding. And other organisations have actually suffered, worse than we have. So if we could go to the next slide. We actually say that really it's not just our content, our brand that's at risk, it's actually facts themselves. And we could have a long and philosophical argument, got lots of professors on this call about, what facts are. But there are things which are true and there are things which are important, and there is information which is important. And I wonder sometimes whether we've got into a bit of a luxury in actually starting to believe that, we can have an alternate view of those. When it comes to trying to get our way back to those facts, so we obviously appreciate that facts do change, science changes, things get updated, we're not suggesting they don't, but we can put out a best guess of where we are with something, and we can tell people things that are actually incontrovertibly true. And when we try to do that, there are these 4 key defenses. So it's the detection that we've talked about, deepfake detection of content made with AI or otherwise altered. It's media and information literacy. It's newsroom collaboration. There's lots of work we've been involved with in this space, which has been really interesting. And it's wonderful, I think, seeing newsrooms and other organisations such as the platforms and academics working together much more closely these days. The rivalries are still there, but actually this is too important not to collaborate on. So there's some really great work going on in that field. And then, as we've mentioned on this call before, media provenance. So specifically C2PA, which was something that the BBC has been involved with since its inception, and we are really proud to be, and we have seen it unfold and really start to take a hold in the last few years, which has been I think really important, and we'd like to see it go yet further. We'd also like to put it in much more scale in our own content, which is something that we're working on at the moment. So if we go into the next slide, I'll just do a very quick run around. So media provenance, this is the credentials that we've talked about. So it allows you to do 3 things really. Trace the content back to its source via secure metadata. And this is cryptographic hashing, essentially. It also allows you to put in details about, the transparency around that piece of content. So we've used it in the BBC to explain really in a bit more forensic detail, how this piece of content came about, where we got it from, why we think that it happens to be important, why we think it's trustworthy. And I'll show you how we've done that in just a second. And also, and I know that Maurice has been across this very, very heavily in TikTok, flagging the use of synthetic or AI generated material is a very key use case, which has actually accelerated, I think, the delivery of C2PA in many organisations. So yeah, it's delivered via cryptographic hashing, and it uses this standard. So C2PA is effectively a standard, an open standard, co-created by the BBC's and many others, Microsoft, Adobe, and lots of other people, including more media organisations. So I think my second last slide has a little example of what the BBC has done. So this is the image you see is a video from Haiti. It's the first piece of content that we put out last March. And it shows, it's not a very good picture actually, but it shows a car park in Haiti where there was some serious unrest happening. And we were able to then, if we go on to the next slide, I'm not going to talk about the arrest because we've covered that already, but we had this the little box underneath the picture, which shows you what had happened, and it just gives you that sort of work that we've always done and perhaps kept within the journalistic community, kept within our newsrooms. Actually exposing that has been a really big part of our CEO news, her kind of her take on where we should be going with news. So transparency and explaining to audiences how we've done the things we've done, really important. So finally, on this final slide, what you'll see is some of the individuals and organisations who, well, the organisations actually, who have taken part. These are the original organisations that came together for Project Origin, which was one half of the two projects that led to the C2PA, the other being the Content Authenticity Initiative. And I just wanted to put that slide up to finish on, really, to say that this is this entire effort that we're all making to tackle disinformation and to help audiences and help people to access trustworthy information safely. It is a joint and a collaborative effort. Nobody can do it on their own. And I think one of the wonderful things about it, if I'm going to be optimistic, is how fantastically the communities that care about this and that are involved with this have pulled together and are still pulling together to make sure that, we do our best to address what's become, as we've said a couple of times before on this call, an existential threat to journalism, but also to democracy and to the societies that we live in.
Thank you, Laura. You mentioned newsroom collaboration. I'd just like to clarify something. You seem to be suggesting that was a sort of a nationwide UK thing, but is there also an international dimension to that?
Yeah, so there's lots of different work going on. So the BBC was involved in something a few years ago called the Trusted News Initiative, which pulled together very much a global collaboration of newsrooms. We had everybody from the Hindu to several American organisations, organisations from across Asia and way beyond, lots of Europeans. And that did some quite important work, actually, particularly during COVID, in getting together very quickly with the platforms and debunking essentially things that came out at that point. I think that work now needs to kind of reconvene, and we need to sort of see where it goes next. And the landscape has moved, and we talked a little bit about deepfake detection, how that's moved on as well. But I think it was great, and I think it really did just give a kind of a touch point for organisations to kind of check in with each other, which was really valuable. But then we've also got something which we run in London, but again, it's kind of with international organisations where publishers and journalists get together in a room and talk about things like generative AI. How are we doing guidelines? How are we doing with it? What are we doing? Can we share best practice? And again, it's another example of how I think the whole journalistic community feels much more bonded in the face of these kind of not always threats. Some of them are developments, some of them are welcome, but in the face of very, very fast moving technology.
Thank you very much. I'd like to go back now to Professor Beckett, if that's possible. Charlie, from your vantage point, where you're sort of in touch with media in the UK and beyond, how much actual collaboration and exchange do you see around these challenges?
Yeah, well, it's been a sea change, as Laura mentioned, and it's not just around, misinformation, it's around the whole technology piece and even beyond that in terms of just editorial. Because especially, I mean, we work most with the news organizations in the so-called Global South, and they've been facing an existential threat for decades, if not for always. There's always a struggle of sustainability there. So in that sense, they are kind of used to this. But yeah, certainly we're seeing collaboration within newsrooms. The tech people are talking to the editorial people, are talking to the marketing people, which is really important. You're seeing an exchange of learning, especially, as I say, around technology. There's much more of a sense of a kind of open source tradition. If you've got tools, then you are more likely to share them because you will then learn from other people's experience. So it's actually a rather positive thing. It's not just a defensive thing against, the threat of deepfakes or whatever. And that's because basically the news industry throughout the world is actually quite small. Compared to the tech companies, it's tiny. And so it absolutely makes sense for people to to share experiences and to share learning and to share resources. And of course, my project is built on the idea that everything we do is open source, everything we do is collaborative. And that's been an important lesson, that you have to learn how to collaborate. Collaborate is such a lovely soft word. It's like community. Everyone's in favor of it. But in practice, you have to learn how to do it and how to do it well. But yeah, that's certainly been one of the sea changes.
Thanks, Charlie. Let's go to one of the big tech companies, Maurice at TikTok. And Maurice, how much collaboration are you involved in, or is this a question of TikTok looking after its own back garden, so to speak?
Well, we're always collaborating at TikTok, whether it's internally, where in my role, I'm supporting different teams, whether it be product, legal, communications, or externally, where we're working with stakeholders and regulators. We recognize that this is certainly an ecosystem issue. This is a challenge that the globe is facing, and we're all learning together. The pace of the technology when it comes to AI is unlike anything that we've ever experienced. And so I think that as we continue to grow and the technology continues to develop, these partnerships are even more important, that sharing of not only knowledge, but of resources. So, for example, we've consulted with Witness. In the US, we've partnered with MediaWise. We are actively engaged in leveraging our own technical capabilities to actually give back to the C2PA standard. We want to make sure that it's a standard that is robust, that is interoperable, and at the end of the day, people want to use it. And so it's in that spirit of sharing and partnering that we continue to make sure that we're as available as we can be with organizations that want to partner with us.
What about humans? You've spoken about technology. What about old-fashioned fact-checking? Is that something that you go in for as well, or like Meta, have you decided that technology is the only answer?
Oh, for us, it's a combination of people and the technology. The technology is great when you're talking about speed, scale, repeatability, but it's the nuances that really, require that human touch. So, for example, in the US, just a couple of weeks ago, we launched a new feature called Footnotes. That gives our community more context about the content that they're seeing on the platform. This means that users in the US will be able to add relevant information to content, and that the broader user base will be able to view that information and have a better understanding of what it is that they're seeing. So this is in addition to content labels, to search banners where we add additional information, and even our fact checking program. So this is not a replacement for any of those. This is a supplement. So it's all of these measures coming together that for us, we think is the right way to move forward, to provide that extra bit of information to give people a sense of what is authentic about the content that they are engaging with.
Thank you very much, Maurice. And I'd like to do a final quick fire round, just one short sentence from each of the panelists. Can you identify the one thing that everybody should be doing now to combat misinformation and disinformation? And could I start with Laura at the BBC, please?
Yes, absolutely, you can. I mean, I would say this, but sign your work, and get media provenance out there. It's going to change the way that we use the internet, and we need to be using it collectively across the industry. Would be mine.
Charlie.
Mine would be actually, fun enough, obviously get across the AI and the technology and so on. But actually, it would be to journalists, it would be to say, use the AI to make yourself more efficient so you can do more human stuff. That's what's going to counter misinformation. That is what is going to counter deepfakes. If you get out there and do real journalism with real people in real places about real issues that care to people, and if you connect your audience as human beings, then that is going to be the best way to counter the threats of technology.
Thanks, Charlie. Maurice?
Consider how your message is going to reach the audience. Are you considering what language that message is going to be in? Are you considering folks that have accessibility needs? So if you're counting on a visual watermark, what does that mean for someone who is low or no vision and they're consuming that content as well? So making sure that the message reaches the people who you want it to reach. Otherwise, they're going to go where that message can actually reach them.
Thank you. Shireen?
So many wonderful messages here. I'll say that we are in a crossroads. We are optimistic. We can change how we are heading and where we are heading. And it's a good time to get involved in all those development and make sure they are developed ethically. And innovation is not really sidetracking, human rights frameworks and considerations. So we are at the point that we can decide how our future will look like.
Thanks very much. And Touraj.
Well, since I have the last word, I have two quick things to say. One is think global. Don't think only on exactly the little thing short term that you are doing. It should be global from the ecosystem point of view, as long as in future, so not short-term solutions. And second, I think literacy is absolutely, and creating awareness is extremely important. I think that all of us, we have to not only, even professionals who are involved in that, continue to become aware of things exist and are being developed and are evolving, and also evangelize that all around us. This is the only way we could really get a chance to cope with this challenge.
Thanks very much, Touraj. And we've had a couple of late questions come in, and the first is for Charlie. So question for Professor Beckett: would journalists at one point have to reveal their sources to prove that they're providing truthful information?
Not always. I mean, they don't at the moment. If you're getting information from people that's, for example, a bit secret, you certainly don't. Yes, anything like that is a good idea. I think the more that journalists can link to where they got information from, where they can be clear about how they've done their journalism, I think is great. But in the end, you're going to build up a relationship over time with a news brand or a journalist. That's why influence is so powerful, because you can identify where you're getting your information from and you build up that relationship over time. But yes, trying to engage more, trying to be more transparent, it's got to be good, hasn't it?
Thanks, Charlie. And then we have a question about pre-bunking. Does anyone know what pre-bunking is? Please, Touraj, are you familiar with pre-bunking?
No, I'm not familiar with it. I'm just looking at the on ChatGPT, and it says proactively combat misinformation by educating people.
I'd never heard of it either. That makes it.
Fine.
I can see that I'm in good company, so I'm not going to worry about my ignorance. If no one else is aware of pre-bunking, let's go to the next question. This is someone saying that they're new to research and planning to take admission for a master, and thinking of disinformation as a topic and combating it by borrowing techniques from cyber threat intelligence. What do you think of that? Cyber threat intelligence applied to fighting misinformation. Who can we? Have to be one of the professors. Touraj, can we apply cyber threat intelligence to combating or tackling disinformation?
Yes, absolutely. And there are a lot of similarities and a lot of lessons to be learned from the cybersecurity in general. One of them is that one solution often doesn't respond to all universal threats. And the other one is that misinformation is not just a completely standalone problem and challenge. It's together with a lot of other things. It's together with the problem of access to information, authenticity in general, and security in general. So I don't think we should look at misinformation, disinformation, and the use of AI to create content that can mislead, either for forgery or for disinformation, in an isolation. We don't need tools that only are designed for this purpose, but they should be put in a larger umbrella, larger context of other cybersecurity threats. And there are lessons to be learned, multiple tools that are complementary, maybe sometimes even overlapping, so that if one protection measure breaks, there are a few others at least that are there to respond to it. So absolutely, yes, there is a lot to be learned from the world of cybersecurity and security in general.
Thank you very much, Tiraj. I think we've come to the end of the hour. Somebody has done a great job in looking up pre-bunking, and we'll share a link about that in the chat afterwards on the and on the ITU page. I'd like to invite everyone to continue this conversation in the ITU neural network, and if you're a user of LinkedIn, on the LinkedIn page of the collaboration for AI and multimedia authenticity. Thank you all very much for following today's webinar. Goodbye.
Thank you for participating in today's AI for Good session. We hope you've learnt something new, innovative, and engaging in today's event. We now encourage you to continue the conversation on the live video wall in the neural network. Here you can ask questions, like and comment, share links, complete the poll, connect with interesting profiles, or speak one-on-one using the chat and video function. We invite you to explore the lobby, try the smart matching quiz, visit the virtual exhibits, poster boards, the e-shop, and build your personalized AI for Good program. Let's shape the future of AI for good.